With Finland finally independent, the country ended up in what many freshly independent countries end up in: civil war. The Declaration of Independence was already not unanimous, and the tensions rose between the right-wing government and the workers' movement and Social Democratic Party. The parliament failed to agree on a force of law enforcement, leading to both sides forming militias, white and red guards, which kept arming and radicalizing, ultimately leading to the start of the Civil War in January 1918. In history, civil wars are often labeled as exceptionally brutal because it's one nation fighting brother against brother. Well, such is the case with the Finnish Civil War too, and it remains a sensitive subject to this day. The decisive battles were fought in the spring of 1918, with the bloody Battle of Tampere being a turning point in favor of the Whites, who won the war with the support of Germany, while Russia supported the Reds. The war was brutal, but even more so was its aftermath. Thousands of Red prisoners died in prison camps shortly after, and the nation was deeply divided. After crushing the Reds' revolt, the Whites worked to turn Finland into a kingdom, with the German emperor's brother-in-law on the throne. Germany's defeat in the First World War put an end to these plans, and Carlo Juho Ståhlberg became the first president of the Republic of Finland in 1919. Continuing with the war theme, the following years saw Finnish volunteers taking part in the so-called kinship wars, with Finnic peoples seeking to break out of Soviet Russia. A notable result of these conflicts was Estonia's independence. Estonian history is in general intertwined with ours, but it is also unfortunately largely outside of the scope of this video. Nowadays, Estonia is seen somewhat as Finland's little brother, but especially during our prehistory, that is, before the Middle Ages, a great amount of material and cultural influence reached today's Finland through Estonia. Finland's borders remained largely the same as during the Grand Duchy era. The Åland Islands were given to Finland with the decision of the League of Nations, despite the population being dominantly Swedish speakers. The tragedy of the Civil War was followed by what I would describe as a great success. The policies of the 1920s improved equal opportunity and softened the tensions between the former Civil War enemies. Progressive taxation was introduced, and the tenant farmers were given the right to own land. This essentially gave more people something personal to fight for, with the rising threat of the common enemy, the Soviet Union. The standard of living went up until the Great Depression, but its effect on Finland remained relatively small. Compulsory education was introduced, as well as compulsory military service. A much less successful bill was that of Prohibition. Finns had grown very fond of booze, and the ban of alcohol resulted in widespread smuggling and black market, with the police confiscating 1 million liters of alcohol in 1930. I didn't find statistics of alcohol consumption before and during the Prohibition, but I think it looks like the drinking did not exactly decrease, and alcohol-related violent crime reached an all-time high. An early building block of the Finnish welfare state was the creation of a modern pension system. The basic pension bill was passed in 1937, improving people's access to a decent standard of living. The pension system was and still is a goldmine for the post-World War II baby boomers. Not so much so for the younger generations. The Communist Party was banned following the Civil War, as well as most communist activities. The far-right Lapua movement, on the other hand, was gaining traction in the Bothnian region. Opposing communism and left-wing policies, They beat and kidnapped their perceived enemies in the so-called muilutus fashion. The movement kept on radicalizing and in 1932 sought to overthrow the government. They were, however, sung into the swamp by President Svinhuvud's speech on the radio and abandoned the uprising. Later the same year, Finland signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. Being a reliable and friendly neighbor, this of course meant that the Soviet Union would not attack Finland. And indeed, in November 1939, Stalin's army didn't swarm across the border as per their deal with Hitler's Germany. This conflict, known as the Winter War, is perhaps the best known part of Finnish history. The underarmed and unprepared Finns fought off the invaders with remarkable sisu. Following the successful post-Civil War reforms, the nation stood largely united and empowered by what is known as the Winter War spirit. Other nations sent their thoughts and prayers and changed their profile pictures. Despite this, the superior numbers of the enemy drained the Finnish defense, and a peace treaty was signed in March 1940. Foreigners often amusingly disagree with this, but the fact is that Finland lost the war and was forced to give up territories despite maintaining independence. The defeat left the country depressed and angry. With the Second World War in full swing and Germany launching an invasion into the Soviet Union, Finland joined the offense in order to regain lost territories, with German troops invading Russia from Lapland. This would be known as the Continuation War, indicating how Finland was not pleased with the result of the Winter War. By the way, some might notice that these clips are by another channel focusing on an aspect of Finnish history. Those of you who recognize it, I would ask you to let the others know in the comments. The Finnish offensive was at first successful, but with the tide of the war turning sour for Germany, the Soviet Union was able to focus more on the Finnish front, ultimately pushing back the invasion in the summer of 1944. Besides further territorial losses, one condition in the following Moscow armistice was driving the Germans out. The Finns started by kindly asking the Germans to leave. Stalin was not satisfied, and Finland was forced to take up arms. This would be known as the Lapland War. The casualties were only a few thousand on each side, but the disgruntled Germans burned and destroyed much of the north of Finland as they withdrew to Norway. With the World War II over, the Paris peace treaties had Finland cede more of Karelia, islands in the Gulf of Finland, Salla and Petsamo. Furthermore, Finland agreed to pay $300 million worth of war reparations in the form of ships, trains and such to the Soviet Union. I think that would be around 5 billion today, but don't quote me on that. While a significant proportion of Finland's war-torn economy was bound to these reparations, they have also been thought to have benefited the industry, forcing Finland to modernize its metal industry. Finland refused Marshall Plan money from the US, which helped to rebuild and create dependency on the US in Europe. The refusal was in order not to upset the Soviet Union. This attitude, later called Finlandisation, defined Finland's post-war position in the following decades, walking on eggshells to avoid further war and allowing Soviet interests to influence matters in the domestic policy as well. This also challenged Finland's neutral position with the agreement of friendship, cooperation and mutual assistance, basically requiring Finland to ask for Soviet military aid in the face of a Western invasion. Some relief to the ordinary people in the tense post-war years was brought by the 1952 Summer Olympics in Helsinki. The games were a success and a well-needed boost for the country. And boosted was the economy too, with for example the country's reconstruction and increasing exports to the Soviet Union and the West as the country was industrializing rapidly. I've lost count long ago of how many times I've said that Finland was still an agrarian society in this series. Well, by this point, that was no longer the case. Urbanization happened hand in hand with the economic growth, with the majority of the people living in cities by 1970. In the 80s, Finland had one of the highest standards of living, quite the contrast to the famine-ridden nation only a few generations back. The economy grew exceedingly fast as the Bank of Finland loosened the regulation of foreign credit money. This then backfired in 1991 with the credit bubble bursting and the country falling into depression, causing widespread unemployment and bankruptcies. The suicide rate grew alarmingly. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Finland finally felt free to join the European Union in 1995 and NATO in 2022. The former being the same year as the national ice hockey team won the World Championships, an event which has reached mythical proportions in our collective memory. At the turn of the millennium, Nokia had grown to be the largest mobile phone vendor in the world, and its significance to the country was great. Around the same time, Finnish metal bands were breaking through across the world with their distinctive sound. And as this series started with metal band related puns, I feel like this could be a good point to conclude it. Of course, in comparison with the Stone Age, we know so much more about the past 100 years, and I've had to leave out quite a bit to keep the production of this series manageable. So as always, feel free to add your thoughts and prayers in the comments. What did I miss? What could be expanded on or maybe made into a video of its own? This has been a long but very enjoyable process, and if you made it here from the start, well, maybe you can come up with better things to do with your life. But anyway, I'm very grateful. And if you have enjoyed these and would like to support this work by giving me your money, there are comics depicting early medieval Finnish history with trolls, t-shirts and other wearables with some brand new designs, and prints of the artwork used in this series and channel, all scattered among different shops for maximum inconvenience. Links are down in the video description. Thank you once again. This has been the animated history of Finland or something like that. I have been Antti Palosaari and you have been someone else. Unless you are me watching my own video, in which case you are also me. What the hell, I'm tired, so maybe that's enough for this time.